This is slide 5, stigma and style for pollen tube. And we are to look for the stigma, style, ovary, and pollen tube in this slide. Right now I have it on our lowest magnification. This is our 40 times magnification. And I'm hovering over the very tip of the entire structure that you can see. So I'm just going to scroll down so you can see the whole thing. We will not be increasing the magnification a lot. We might want to look a little bit higher so that we can see some more detail. But this is a very large structure, so we're going to spend most of our time here at the lowest magnification. So again, I'm just going to scroll down. It's a long, thin structure. This is our female reproductive parts, the top of which is referred to as the stigma. The stigma extends down into the style, which will ultimately terminate then at the ovary, which would be at the very base here. Now, as you can see, there's a hollow portion here in the middle of the style here, and it opens to the top at the stigma. Now, this is where our pollen tube from our tube cell will grow down, extend down, and as I had mentioned in the last slide, allow for the sperm to enter into a space called the micropyle, which will allow the sperm to access our mature female gametophyte. And so the pollen tube will grow down here in the center of our stigma and style. We will increase our magnification here to see if we can see more detail here at the tip, because I suspect that we will see that these are each individual pollen grains which have gathered at the stigma to allow for one of them to fertilize our egg and produce a new plant embryo. So let's increase that magnification and see what we can find. So here we are at the very tip. I'm going to find focus a little bit. And if we scroll around here, it sure enough looks like you can see a pollen grain that looks very similar to what we saw on our last slide. We'll increase our magnification once more. This is now the highest magnification that we can get. And I will focus that a little bit to help us see the pollen grains. And sure enough, it looks like we've got lots of pollen grains. They are meeting at the stigma, which of course will be down here. But they do look very similar in structure to the pollen grains that we saw on our last slide. And some of them may even have produced a tube. That one there looked like it might have, but there are a lot of pollen grains that have landed here in the hopes that one of them will be able to produce a new plant embryo. They've gathered at the top here. One of them will then produce a tube which will enter down and travel down the stigma, style, and ovary. Okay, so that's about all we can see. I will decrease our magnification so that you can see the whole structure one last time. Here we are. This is the pollen that has gathered at the top at the stigma and produces a pollen tube that extends down the stigma, style, and ovary to allow for fertilization.